Marcus Reed had been working at the Intergalactic research station for 3 months, and still felt like he was drowning in a sea of protocols and alien customs. The massive space station orbited a neutral moon between Earth and the Caltharian Empire, serving as a diplomatic and scientific hub where dozens of species worked together on various projects. Marcus was part of the human delegation assigned to the xenobiology department, where he spent his days cataloging samples and running tests alongside researchers from across the galaxy. Caltharians were among the most prominent species at the station. They were tall, graceful beings with smooth purple skin and multiple tentacle appendages that sprouted from their shoulders and moved with fluid precision. Their tentacles were not just decorative, but served as additional limbs capable of complex manipulation and even emotional expression. Marcus had observed how the tentacles would shimmer and change color based on the Caltharian's mood or intentions. Among the Caltharian researchers was Lyra, whose expertise in quantum biology had earned her respect throughout the station. She was particularly striking even by Caltharian standards, with tentacles that displayed an unusual iridescent quality, shifting between deep purples and brilliant golds. Marcus had worked with her on several projects and found her to be incredibly intelligent and surprisingly patient with his questions about Caltharian science. Despite the professional relationship, Marcus found himself increasingly drawn to Lyra's presence. There was something about her methodical approach to research and her gentle way of explaining complex concepts that he found captivating. Her tentacles would often move in what seemed like unconscious patterns, while she worked creating mesmerizing displays of color and motion. Marcus had tried to learn about Caltharian culture through the station's database, but found the information frustratingly vague when it came to social interactions. Human resources had provided basic guidelines about avoiding physical contact and respecting personal space, but offered little insight into appropriate compliments or casual conversation. Most humans simply stuck to work-related topics when interacting with alien colleagues. One morning, Marcus arrived at the lab to find Lyra already deep in her research. Her tentacles were particularly vibrant that day, displaying colors he had never seen before. They moved with an almost dance-like quality as she manipulated various instruments and data displays. The sight was genuinely beautiful, and Marcus found himself wondering if it would be appropriate to acknowledge it. As he settled into his workstation, Marcus wrestled with the decision. In human culture, complimenting someone's appearance was generally considered friendly and positive. He had complimented human colleagues on their hair or clothing without incident. Surely acknowledging the obvious beauty of Lyra's tentacles would be seen as a kind gesture. The lab was quiet except for the soft humming of equipment and the occasional beep of completed processes. Marcus glanced around and noticed they were alone for the moment. Other researchers had not yet arrived for the day's shift. This seemed like the perfect opportunity for a friendly comment, without the pressure of an audience. Taking a deep breath, Marcus turned toward Lyra's workstation. She was focused on a complex molecular diagram, her tentacles weaving through holographic displays with practiced ease. The morning light from the station's artificial sun created stunning highlights across her appendages, making them appear almost luminescent. "Good morning, Lyra," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice casual and friendly. "Your tentacles look great today." The reaction was immediate and unlike anything Marcus had expected. Lyra's tentacles suddenly went rigid and turned a deep crimson color that spread rapidly across their entire length. Her large eyes widened, and she made a soft gasping sound that seemed to come from deep within her chest. The holographic displays flickered and went dark as her tentacles withdrew from the controls. For a moment, the lab was completely silent. Lyra stood frozen, staring at Marcus with an expression he could not read. Her tentacles had begun to tremble slightly, and the crimson color was gradually shifting to what appeared to be a pale silver. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he realized he had clearly made some kind of terrible mistake. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quickly, his voice filled with genuine concern. "I didn't mean to offend you. I was just trying to be friendly." Lyra's tentacles slowly began to move again, though they remained close to her body. The silver color was now predominant, with occasional flashes of gold near the tips. She looked down at her hands, then back at Marcus, with what seemed like uncertainty. "You are being friendly," she said finally, her voice softer than usual. "Among humans this is normal behavior." Marcus nodded eagerly. "Yes, exactly. I just thought your tentacles looked particularly beautiful this morning and wanted to say something nice." The word beautiful seemed to trigger another reaction. Lyra's tentacles pulsed with a warm golden light, and she took a small step backward. Marcus was beginning to realize that he had stumbled into something far more complex than a simple cultural misunderstanding. "Marcus," Lyra said carefully, "do you understand what you have said to me?" The question filled Marcus with dread. Clearly he had violated some important cultural norm, or perhaps used words that had different meanings in Caltharian society. He shook his head, feeling embarrassed and worried about the implications for their working relationship. "I don't understand," Marcus admitted. "I was trying to give you a compliment, but I can see that I've made you uncomfortable. Please help me understand what I did wrong, so I can avoid making the same mistake again." Lyra's tentacles began to move in slow, graceful patterns, and Marcus noticed that other Caltharians had begun to enter the lab. Several of them glanced toward Lyra, and their own tentacles displayed brief flashes of what appeared to be surprise or curiosity. Marcus felt increasingly self-conscious as he realized their interaction was drawing attention. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Lyra suggested, her tentacles now displaying a steady pale blue color. "There are cultural nuances that require explanation." Marcus agreed, immediately grateful for the opportunity to understand his mistake without further embarrassing himself in front of their colleagues. They moved to a small conference room adjacent to the lab, where Lyra activated a privacy screen that would prevent their conversation from being overheard. Once they were alone, Lyra's tentacles began to display more complex patterns of color and movement. Marcus found himself fascinated despite his anxiety about the situation. The tentacles seemed to be communicating something beyond what words could express. In Caltharian culture, Lyra began, tentacles are considered deeply personal. They are not merely functional appendages, but extensions of our inner selves. The colors and movements you observe reflect our emotional states, thoughts, and even our spiritual condition. Marcus nodded, trying to process this information. "So when I complimented your tentacles, I was actually commenting on something very personal." "More than personal," Lyra corrected gently. Among Caltharians, commenting on another's tentacles is reserved for the most intimate relationships. It is something that might be said between life partners or very close family members. For someone outside these relationships to notice and comment on tentacle appearance is considered a declaration of romantic interest. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had essentially walked up to Lyra and made what amounted to a romantic advance without any understanding of the cultural context. No wonder she had reacted so strongly. He felt his face flush with embarrassment and mortification. "I am so sorry," Marcus said, his voice heavy with regret. "I had no idea. I was just trying to be friendly, and I've made everything incredibly awkward. I completely understand if you want to request a different research partner." Lyra's tentacles shifted to a soft purple color, with hints of gold threading through them. She was quiet for a long moment, seeming to consider her response carefully. When she finally spoke, Her voice held a note of something Marcus could not quite identify. Marcus. She said you said my tentacles looked great today. This morning I spent extra time in my meditation chamber focusing on achieving optimal color harmony. I was hoping to present my best self for an important presentation later this week. Marcus looked at her, confused about where this explanation was leading. Lyra's tentacles began to move in what seemed like a more relaxed pattern, and the gold threads became more prominent. What I am trying to say, Lyra continued, is that you noticed something I was particularly proud of today. Your observation was accurate and your intention was kind. While your words carried implications you did not intend, they were not unwelcome. The conference room fell silent as Marcus processed what Lyra had just said. She was not angry or offended by his comment. Instead, she seemed to be suggesting that his accidental romantic overture had been received more positively than he had feared. I don't understand, Marcus said carefully. Are you saying that you're not upset about what I said? Lyra's tentacles displayed a complex pattern of purple and gold that seemed almost like laughter. I am saying that your human directness has created an interesting situation. In Caltharian culture, we court very slowly and formally. The process can take months or even years of careful emotional and spiritual preparation. You have inadvertently accelerated this process considerably. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he began to understand the full scope of what had occurred. So when I complimented your tentacles, you interpreted it as a romantic interest. And you're saying that this interpretation was not entirely wrong. Not entirely wrong. Lyra confirmed, her tentacles now displaying steady gold with occasional purple highlights. I have found our working relationship quite pleasant. Your curiosity about Caltharian science and culture has been refreshing. Most humans seem content to maintain purely professional interactions with alien colleagues, but I've essentially skipped over all the normal courtship procedures. Marcus pointed out. I've probably violated dozens of cultural protocols without even realizing it. Lyra's tentacles moved in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as amusement. You have indeed bypassed traditional protocols. However, there is precedent for cross-species relationships within the galactic community. The key is mutual respect and willingness to learn about each other's cultures. Marcus found himself in the surreal position of having accidentally initiated a romantic relationship with an alien colleague through a well-intentioned compliment. The situation was both terrifying and oddly exciting. Lyra was incredibly intelligent, and he had to admit he had been drawn to her presence in ways he had not fully acknowledged. So where does this leave us? Marcus asked. I don't want to make assumptions about your feelings or rush into something that might damage our working relationship. Lyra's tentacles shifted to a warm purple color with golden tips. It leaves us with an opportunity to explore compatibility while learning about each other's cultures. However, we must proceed carefully. Caltharian bonding customs are complex, and failure to observe them properly could have serious consequences. Marcus nodded, eager to learn more about what would be expected of him. What kind of consequences are we talking about? If we were to pursue this connection and it did not result in a successful bonding, it could affect my standing within Caltharian society. My tentacle patterns are already displaying signs of attachment that will be noticed by other Caltharians. They will expect our relationship to progress according to traditional timelines. The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders. His innocent compliment had set in motion a chain of events that could have significant implications for Lyra's social standing and future prospects. He felt obligated to see this through properly, or find a way to gracefully withdraw without causing her harm. What would traditional progression look like? Marcus asked. How can I make sure I don't accidentally cause problems for you with your community? Lyra's tentacles began to display more complex patterns as she explained the intricacies of Caltharian courtship. There were specific rituals for declaration of interest, formal presentations to family groups, and gradually increasing levels of physical and emotional intimacy. The process was designed to ensure compatibility and strengthen the bond between potential partners. The challenge, Lyra explained, is that these rituals are designed for Caltharian participants. Adapting them for a human partner will require creativity and possibly some negotiation with traditional authorities. Marcus realized that their situation was unprecedented in ways he had not initially understood. They were not just navigating a cross-species relationship, but potentially creating new protocols that could influence how such relationships developed in the future. "Are you willing to work through these challenges?" Marcus asked. "I want to be completely honest with you. I find you fascinating, and I've enjoyed our time together more than I initially realized. But I also don't want to cause problems for you or put pressure on you to pursue something you're not genuinely interested in." Lyra's tentacles shifted to a deep gold color that seemed to pulse with inner light. "Marcus, your honesty is refreshing. Among Caltharians, courtship can become so focused on protocol that genuine feelings are sometimes overlooked. Your direct approach has reminded me that connection should be based on authentic attraction and compatibility." The conversation continued for another hour as they discussed the practical aspects of their situation. They would need to inform their supervisors about the change in their relationship status and potentially request adjustments to their work assignments. There would also be cultural education requirements and possibly formal meetings with Caltharian community leaders. As they prepared to leave the conference room, Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness about the path ahead. What had started as a simple attempt at friendly conversation had evolved into something far more complex and meaningful. He was embarking on a journey that would challenge his understanding of relationships, culture, and his own capacity for adaptation. Lyra's tentacles had settled into a steady pattern of purple and gold that Marcus was beginning to associate with contentment. "There is one more thing you should know," she said as they reached the door. "The compliment you gave me this morning was not the first time you have noticed my tentacles. I have observed you watching their movements during our work sessions. Your attention has been quite flattering." Marcus felt his face warm with embarrassment at being caught in his observations. "I didn't realize I was being so obvious. I hope it didn't make you uncomfortable." "Not uncomfortable," Lyra replied, her tentacles displaying what Marcus now recognized as amusement. "Curious, your interest seemed genuine, rather than mere fascination with alien anatomy. It suggested a deeper level of attention and appreciation." As they returned to the lab, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in the space of a single conversation. He had come to work expecting another routine day of research and analysis. Instead, he had accidentally initiated a cross-species courtship that would require him to learn entirely new ways of understanding relationships and communication. The other researchers in the lab seemed to notice the change in Lyra's tentacle patterns immediately. Several Caltharians approached her during the day, displaying their own complex tentacle communications that Marcus could not interpret. He caught glimpses of surprise approval and what might have been congratulations based on Lyra's responses. Dr. Harrison, the human department head, called Marcus into his office that afternoon. "I've been informed that there's been a development in your relationship with Lyra," he said without preamble. "While the station supports cross-species relationships, there are protocols that need to be followed to ensure everyone's safety and comfort." Marcus explained the morning's events and the cultural misunderstanding that had led to their current situation. Dr. Harrison listened with growing amusement and occasional concern about the implications for departmental dynamics. "You certainly don't do things halfway, Doctor," Harrison observed. "Most humans who end up in cross-species relationships spend months or years gradually building connections. You've managed to accelerate the process considerably." Conversation covered practical matters like potential conflicts of interest, modified work assignments, and the need for cultural consultation services. The station had resources available for cross-species couples, but Marcus would be among the first humans to navigate a relationship with a Keltharian. Over the following weeks, Marcus immersed himself in learning about Keltharian culture with an intensity that surprised even him. He studied their history, philosophy, and social structures. He learned about the significance of different tentacle colors and movements. Most importantly, he began to understand the depth of emotional and spiritual connection that Keltharians expected from their partnerships. Lyra proved to be a patient and thorough teacher. She guided Marcus through the preliminary stages of Keltharian courtship, helping him understand the subtle communications and rituals that would be expected. Her tentacles had begun displaying increasingly complex patterns that other Keltharians recognized as signs of deepening attachment. The first formal milestone came 3 weeks after their initial conversation. Marcus was required to present himself to a group of senior Keltharians for evaluation as a potential partner. The meeting was conducted in a ceremonial chamber aboard the station where Keltharian community leaders assessed his sincerity, knowledge, and commitment to understanding their culture. Marcus had prepared extensively for the meeting, but still felt nervous as he entered the chamber. 5 Keltharians sat in a semicircle, their tentacles displaying formal patterns that conveyed dignity and authority. Lyra was present, but remained silent throughout the proceedings, as was traditional. The questions covered his motivations for pursuing the relationship, his understanding of Keltharian values, and his willingness to undergo the extended courtship process. Marcus answered as honestly as possible, acknowledging his initial cultural ignorance while demonstrating his commitment to learning and growth. The most challenging question came from an elderly Keltharian, whose tentacles displayed deep purple with silver highlights. "Human Marcus, your species is known for impulsive decisions and short attention spans. How can we trust that your interest in Lyra is genuine and lasting rather than mere curiosity about exotic experiences?" Marcus had anticipated this question and had spent considerable time preparing his response. "I understand your concern, and I don't expect you to simply take my word for it. What I can tell you is that my attraction to Lyra goes far beyond curiosity about her physical differences. I'm drawn to her intelligence, her patience, and her way of approaching problems with both logic and intuition. These qualities would be attractive to me regardless of her species." The questioning continued for over an hour, covering topics ranging from Marcus's career goals to his understanding of Keltharian family structures. Finally, the senior Keltharians withdrew to deliberate, while Marcus waited in an adjacent chamber with Lyra. "You did well," Lyra said, her tentacles displaying encouraging patterns. "Your answers demonstrated genuine understanding and respect for our culture. However, the decision will ultimately be based on their assessment of your long-term compatibility with Keltharian society." When the evaluation committee returned, their tentacles displayed formal approval patterns. Keltharian who had its A's SKED, the dosed DEFEN, while each lenging questions spoke for the group. "Human Marcus, you have demonstrated sincerity and commitment to understanding our ways. We approve your entrance into formal courtship with Lyra, subject to successful completion of the traditional milestones." The relief Marcus felt was overwhelming. He had cleared the first major hurdle in what would be a months-long process. However, the approval came with significant responsibilities. He would be expected to maintain certain behavioral standards, participate in cultural education programs, and demonstrate continued growth in his understanding of Caltharian values. As weeks turned into months, Marcus found himself changing in ways he had not anticipated. The disciplined approach to relationship building that Caltharian culture required had given him new perspectives on emotional intimacy and commitment. He learned to communicate through subtle gestures and expressions rather than relying solely on words. Lyra's tentacles had become increasingly responsive to his presence, displaying patterns that seemed to mirror his own emotional state. During their work sessions, they moved together with a synchronization that other researchers began to notice and comment upon. The professional boundary between them had evolved into something deeper while maintaining appropriate public behavior. The second major milestone involved a formal presentation of gifts that demonstrated Marcus's understanding of Caltharian aesthetics and values. He had spent weeks crafting a crystalline sculpture that incorporated both human and Caltharian design elements. The piece was meant to represent the harmony that could exist between different species while acknowledging their distinct characteristics. The gift presentation ceremony was attended by a larger group of Caltharians, including some of Lyra's family members who had traveled from their home world. Marcus felt the weight of their scrutiny as he explained the symbolism and craftsmanship of his creation. Lyra's tentacles displayed patterns of pride and affection that were clearly visible to all present. The sculpture was well received, with several Caltharians commenting on its innovative fusion of artistic traditions. More importantly, Lyra's family members expressed approval of Marcus's effort to honor their daughter through creative expression. The ceremony concluded with Lyra presenting Marcus with a traditional Caltharian bonding pendant that would be worn throughout their courtship. As their relationship progressed, Marcus began to understand that he was not just courting Lyra, but becoming part of a larger cultural community. Other humans at the station looked to him as an example of successful cross-species integration. His experiences were being documented and studied to help future couples navigate similar challenges. Final milestone approached after 6 months of formal courtship. Marcus would be required to demonstrate his commitment through a ceremony that would establish their bond as recognized by both human and Caltharian authorities. The preparation involved intensive spiritual and emotional preparation that tested his dedication to the relationship. Lyra's tentacles had begun displaying the deep gold and purple patterns that indicated readiness for permanent bonding. The sight filled Marcus with both joy and nervous anticipation. They had successfully navigated the complex requirements of Caltharian courtship while building a genuine connection based on mutual respect and affection. The final ceremony took place in the station's main assembly hall, with representatives from multiple species in attendance. Marcus wore formal attire that incorporated both human and Caltharian design elements, while Lyra's tentacles displayed the most complex and beautiful patterns he had ever seen. The ceremony itself was a blend of traditions that honored both their backgrounds, while establishing new precedents for future cross-species unions. As they exchanged vows, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A simple compliment about tentacles had evolved into something far more meaningful and transformative than he could have imagined. He had learned not just about Caltharian culture, but about himself and his capacity for growth and adaptation. The ceremony concluded with Lyra's tentacles displaying patterns of pure joy and contentment that seemed to fill the entire hall with golden light. Marcus felt a profound sense of connection not just to Lyra, but to the larger galactic community they were helping to build through their relationship. Their story became something of a legend at the research station. New arrivals were often told about the human who accidentally started a cross-species courtship with a compliment about tentacles. The tale served as both entertainment and education, highlighting the importance of cultural sensitivity while demonstrating that genuine connection could transcend species boundaries. Years later, Marcus and Lyra continued to work together at the research station while raising their unique family and contributing to the growing understanding of cross-species relationships. Their initial encounter had evolved into a lasting partnership that influenced policies and procedures throughout the galactic community. Marcus often reflected on that morning when he had nervously complimented Lyra's tentacles. The innocent comment had changed both their lives in ways neither could have predicted. It served as a reminder that meaningful connections could emerge from the most unexpected circumstances when approached with openness, honesty, and respect for cultural differences. The research station had become a more inclusive and understanding environment, partly due to their example. Other cross-species couples followed similar paths with the benefit of protocols and support systems that Marcus and Lyra had helped establish. Their legacy extended far beyond their personal relationship to encompass broader changes in how different species interacted and built communities together. Their story demonstrated that love and understanding could transcend not just cultural boundaries, but biological ones as well. The compliment about tentacles had been the beginning of something beautiful and lasting that continued to inspire others to look beyond surface differences and seek genuine connection with beings from across the galaxy.